from the PSIA-AASI satellite studios in Boulder, Colorado, and Nashville, Tennessee. Where are you at this morning, Pete?
Hi, George. I'm at home in Nashville.
You are.
Home in
Well,
my
I
shed.
am in beautiful Colorado today. It is gorgeous here.
Fantastic. Full weather. Gotta love that.
It's yeah, it's a beautiful fall day. I'm very overdressed. I flew out from Portland this morning. It was about 30 degrees, 32 degrees maybe, and got off the plane and it was mid 60s.
It's this time of year when we know what's coming.
Absolutely.
Season is approaching fast, which is exciting.
And Nutcracker is approaching fast too, so I'm actually down here for rehearsal.
You're a multi-talented man.
I try. Well, Pete, as I always start our casts together, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Today, we're going to be talking about professional development, I believe.
Great. Let's do that. That sounds like a good topic, particularly timely in my mind.
So, exactly, with the season coming up, really, what does professional development mean to you?
So I guess when I think about professional development, I think about initial teacher training or initial professional training. And then I think about ongoing training or ongoing development, continuing professional development. I would call it CPD is the kind of term that I'm used to for that. And I think that can be in two different forms. It can be professional, it can be formal or it can be informal. So it could be a clinic, for example, is an example of formal continuing professional development. Or it might be informal in that it might be, I'm going to go and work on this part of my skiing, or I'm going to go out with my friend and we're going to coach each other. But that might be less kind of structured in a sense. There are a couple of ways. And then, I think there are other things that we might think of that are ongoing developmental opportunities that might be in snow sports, or they might be outside of the field as well, but they might contribute. They might be transferable professional development that we might think of. So a few different kind of ways in which I think about that. And to me, it's a really interesting topic because I think it's important that we all continue to grow and learn. We've talked about that before, George, that as long as we are growing, learning, developing, then we're probably going to be better teachers, better educators in that sense. And so I think it's important, and we've been having a lot of conversations at the national level about where that might go, can go, should go, which I'd love to talk more about if that's something that you think listeners might be interested in.
I think we all would be very interested in hearing you talk about that, Pete. And I think it's very timely because we're coming into the beginning of the season, and just think the beginning of the season is so focused on training. We've got new hire training, we've got return instructor training, and everybody just kind of getting back into it. And then we hit Thanksgiving weekend and the holidays, and we're snowed under with work. And Angelo and I talked not too long ago, but it was about quantity and quality, and being too busy to really focus on, let's call it self-care, which would be professional development, where we're thinking of ourselves and working on our skiing and our teaching instead of just getting out there and busting ourselves over lesson after lesson after lesson. How can we actually make the time to get out and do some real development? Because it costs money if you want to go to a formal training, as you were saying. It's also time away from work. And it's so easy, I think, for us as people skills people, where we kind of put ourselves last. We're always looking out for the other person. And it's like we need to get the mindset going that, well, if we take care of ourselves, then we're able to do a better job for other people.
Right. And I think that last point you made is really important, George. If we don't look after ourselves, we can't look after others. And so Nobody wants a exhausted instructor to be teaching them and going through the motions. They want somebody who is engaged and fresh and energized and really genuinely passionate about what they're teaching and the lesson that they're giving. And I think the I mean, the irony of this, let's just put the irony straight out there, George, is that I have the luxury of a paycheck that comes in monthly, and I'm not working full time through the winter on snow teaching. So, I recognize the kind of the irony of me talking about this, and I can see how people could roll their eyes and say that's all very well for you to talk about, and I'm okay with that. I'll take that on the chin, as it were. But I think the idea of prioritizing and making space for us to engage in our own professional development is really important. And so thinking about and making conscious decisions about that now is a good time to be doing it, and thinking about, okay, over the next 6 months, what am I going to do for my own professional development, whether that's formal or informal, whether that's saying, you know what, I'm going to try and spend an hour every other day skiing and riding for myself, or I'm going to try and finish early and do something that I know rejuvenates me. I'm going to try and do some yoga and look after my own mobility and do some mobility work, or I'm going to go and work through this manual on my own, or I'm going to go and spend some time with a colleague and we're going to deliberately coach each other on something. Or maybe you're going to work with a colleague and say, will you take an hour every week and come and watch me teach 1 hour of a lesson and give me some feedback on that lesson? And I'll do the same for you, and we'll kind of make a partnership of helping to develop each other's teaching in some way or another. I think those kind of things are exactly the conversations that we should be having right now. And mostly, of course, at this time of year, most of our focus tends to be on, okay, what are we skiing on and how well are we skiing, or what are we riding on and how well are we riding, and are we ready for the season in that sense? But I think there's a large part of that focuses on 1/3 of the learning connection model, and we should also think about the other two triangles in the learning connection model for that professional development.
And which are those?
The teaching and the people triangles. And as I'm saying that, I'm just thinking about one of our previous podcasts where we talked about the importance of the technical. So I don't want to sound as if, I realize that could sound contradictory. Could sound like I'm speaking out both sides of my mouth at the same time. And obviously those 3 areas are really important, which probably takes us on to a conversation that we've been having about how we evolve professional development and what the vision for that is for, in particular, continuing education units across the association, and what that could look like in the future. And so I'd love to talk about that if you think that would be of interest to listeners, George.
Absolutely. And I do have to mention, it's funny, after you and I had our discussion of technical skills, and I was telling you how weak I've gotten because I wasn't able to get out on the hill much last year, I actually went into the gym and I've been doing a lot of things, working on balance and other skills, one leg, balancing on physio balls, doing a lot of things that I had put off that, I was losing those skills because I just was really focusing on cardio and teaching my cycling class. But I really appreciate you having that chat with me because it opened my eyes and was like, now get to work on this, buddy.
Well, good. I'm delighted to hear it. I had squat day this week at the gym and was in pain, and I was thinking about you as I was struggling to stand up. So you and me both. I figure that even just standing still is progress, because you're not getting worse and worse and worse every year. So I feel like I'm at that age now. So I suppose, what I've been thinking about with regard to continuing education units is trying to be fairly strategic about those, and mapping. We have a plan to map continuing education unit opportunities onto the learning connection model. And because I'm a visual kind of person, I think about this in visual terms, and I think about writing on a post-it every offering that every region has, and then putting those on a flip chart with the learning connection model on, and seeing where the heavy focus is and where the lighter focus is on across the learning connection model. And then I think in the long run would be to try and figure out a way to probably do some streamlining of those, because there will no doubt be a lot of overlap of those, and then think about how people could take continuing education units in any of those, in any of the regions and in any of those areas, but also encourage people to take them in areas that they wouldn't necessarily take them in. So, and part of this may be controversial, and this is just I'm just speaking for me, I'm not speaking for anybody else but me. I would love to see a system that meant that the system made you move into areas for continuing education units that you weren't in last year. So, for example, as you know, I'm very passionate about teaching. And so if I look at a list of continuing education courses, I will always tend to lean towards a teaching course to improve my teaching. What I should do is move around and do a technical course and do a people skills course and do a teaching course, and kind of rotate around those, because that's going to likely make me a more rounded individual. It's likely going to make me a better teacher all round, because we're only as good as our weakest point in the learning connection model. And so I think that I get excited about that vision, because it also makes me think about the possibility for development of new courses and new clinics and new offerings, opportunities to have clinics and courses that are online as well as in person, and a kind of balance of all of those. And I think that could really help us all to improve the quality of what we do right across the country. I'll pause.
I am floored that you actually admitted that you have a weakness in the learning connection. I've taken a clinic with you, and you're marvelous.
Now, George, I know you're just buttering me up now, so.
And no, that was actually a very genuine compliment. The intro to the compliment, but I bring that up. Obviously, I mean, I'm very open about weakened technical skills, because I've had some really horrific injuries that put some real limitations on what I can do, and mental fear. But I like that you're saying that, because you're making me think as we're talking. It's like, I feel like a good communicator in things, and I would tend to overlook things in the people skills realm, things like that, because I'm always really trying to work on my technical issues and enjoy it when I do it. But there are definitely other areas where I need to improve, and that's in every area of the learning connection, and getting more information and becoming better in those. How can we really take an honest look at ourselves and determine, I really do need to grow in this area, I almost feel like something you were talking about earlier, with maybe have a friend come and watch you teach, or really have some one-on-one with someone, a peer that can give you some honest feedback. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a really big fan of that, and I think that's so there's a couple of things that I've got kind of spinning around in my head as we're talking, George. As always, you kind of get me excited about different ideas here. And so one of them is, and I think this is all strength to the whole association, and particularly to the ELC and the XLC and to all of the task forces, is that we now have all of the assessment forms online. They're all available online for people to see and to use. So before anybody goes forward for an assessment, they can see exactly what they're going to be assessed on. And so those assessment forms can be used for professional development too. So if you and I were going to go out skiing, George, there's nothing to stop us printing off those assessment forms. And I say to you, George, I am really working on this part of the assessment form. Say it's the the assessment of students' needs. So assessing the group and making a plan for the lesson. Though that part might be something that I'm really struggling with and grappling with and trying to improve on. And I might say to you, I want you to watch me teach for the next hour and just focus on that. You can then look through the assessment form. You can look at those learning outcomes and assessment criteria. If you wanted to, you could look at the performance guide. You could look at the national standards. And then afterwards, you and I can buy you very expensive coffee, and you can give me feedback based on the assessment form that's right there. And that to me is what wonderful one-on-one professional development that would be. And you don't need to be an examiner. I don't need to be an examiner. We can just do that together as part of our learning process. And that, you know, so I do this when I write an article. I give it to some friends who I respect to read it and to give me critical feedback, because I always say it's much easier to hear it from them than it is to receive that feedback from somebody who's anonymous, who I can't necessarily hear their voice, but it's somehow easier to hear feedback from people who you know and respect and hold in high regard. And so I think that would be, to me, a really easy way of getting professional development feedback through the season as we have opportunities for that, and just creating opportunities for that to happen.
I love that. And you are now going to be getting a copy as each chapter of my cessation manual is written, because I want to hear feedback in my head with that amazing accent of yours.
I'll record it on an audio message for you. But I think that the other thing that you got me spinning around with there was, and we've been talking about, is how do we improve the quality of feedback that people get, or feed forward? We can just use those terms synonymously for convenience now. How do we improve what people get when they go for an assessment, whether that's for level 1, level 2, or level 3, whether it's for a CS, FS, adaptive, whatever it's for? How do we improve that quality of feedback? And one thing I think we could use this whole kind of, if you like, infrastructure or architecture for would be to help that process. So if I went forward for, say, a level 1 assessment, and you were the examiner, George, at the end, you could give me my scores, you could write me some feedback, but then you could also say, here are clinics that I suggest would really help you. I really suggest you focus on clinics in this triangle of the learning connection model, or I think these are specific clinics that I know of that you would really benefit from. And that, at the end of an assessment, I would go away thinking, okay, great. I now know what I need to do. I know where I need to put my energy. I know what clinics I need to attend. I know what I need to do. And that's regardless of whether I pass or fail. Right.
Oh, I totally took that. I actually took that as a pass.
Right.
You did a great job, Pete, and I would never say you did a great job, but because that's horrible feedback. Uh, but these are some areas where you can be even better.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And his, I'm helping to shine the light, if you like, on the professional development pathway that I think would make sense for you. That would be wonderful information for people to have. And then they could do what they want with it, but it would certainly help people. And I think um, I would love to see that in place. I think that would be really helpful for people.
Well, it sounds to me like you actually go through the calendar and you look and you select clinics that you really want to take based on the topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that um, and I'm becoming better at it because I think as we get older, our egos perhaps get more. We're used to them being more battered, and so we're used to putting ourselves into more vulnerable positions. But I like being in a position where I can't do things, where I learn, where I'm with people, with people who can help me to become better and point those things out. And so I really like that, and I think now is the time of year to be doing it. I think you know, everybody across the association should be thinking, okay, how do I want to do this? And I think it connects to something I heard Angelo, I think, talking to you about being honest with yourself and are you willing to put the work in, and I think kind of having those plans and saying, okay, I want to really develop in this way through the season and this is what it looks like. And so these are the steps that I'm going to take. That takes some careful planning and organization. That takes a spreadsheet for me. I'm all about a good spreadsheet.
What does, if you've got some goals, you've really got to work to meet those if they're real. And you're not just saying, oh, yeah, I want to do this. It's it's a real commitment. And it's a great feeling to actually achieve those goals when you do it.
Right, right. And I think that, then thinking about how do you make time to recharge your batteries? I see a lot of people through the season who get more and more tired through the season. And, it's that kind of, oh, I'm just so busy, 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 busy. And you say, well, okay, but how do you make time for yourself? How do you make sure that you're not completely run ragged? And I am guilty of that. The next 2 months of my calendar are crazy. But I think about it and think, okay, well, I'm gonna try and build in some space there so that I can recharge or that I can just rest, that kind of thing.
You've really given me a good idea here because every year we do a podcast about burnout. And it usually happens at the beginning of February with people who are already burned out. And it would be really good to address burnout when we're excited and enthusiastic about the upcoming season to work on, let's set up our schedule in a realistic way and um, be able to talk with our leaders and managers and let them know how we're feeling because it is hard to be in a locker room when you or and I've heard this enough year after year where it's, I mean, you hear that person who has really reached the point of burnout and often they don't want to address anyone with those issues because they're afraid or it's like, well, I still need to work, I've got to make my check. And it's like, but we don't ever want you getting to that point of burnout. So that would actually be a great chat to have early in the season.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can plan those things, right? Once you've worked a few seasons, you can spot the patterns if you're honest with yourself. And, I know I used to really suffer because my life is more on an academic calendar, really. I used to get to a point where, I would start teaching in August or September. And by the end of October, there was always a week where I was just exhausted. And and I got to recognize it and then started to put in place mechanisms to try and avoid that. So I would plan some weekends where I was just going to protect those weekends to do absolutely nothing other than go camping and recharge myself in nature. not put myself under any pressure at all. And, you know, so I think we can do those things that actually help us to stay healthy, and to avoid those feelings of being burnt out, tired out, shattered, you know, because that's not fun for anybody. And they're the times when we're more vulnerable to catch a cold or come down with something or to be injured in some way or another. So, you know, I think there's a lot we can do with that, and eat healthy and all those kind of things that are easy to pass by.
I could always tell I was hitting that point when it's a day off and hey, let's go ski. And I'm like, no,
Yeah,
I'm on snow 5 days a week, and I just really need to be at home
right.
and give up that time of getting to go out and have fun with friends and family, just because you're too tired. And I've hit that a lot. So,
Yeah.
who am I to talk about how to avoid burnout, Pete?
Well, you've got experience of it, so we've got some experience, so we know how to we know what we don't need to do, so we can figure out, working backwards from that, we can reverse engineer it. So yeah, I'm certainly, just to be clear, I'm certainly not saying I have all the answers, but I know it's something that interests me and is a challenge. I know it's not just me that's a challenge for, so I think it's an important conversation.
I'd love for you to summarize professional development. I think this has been a really good chat. I really like that you plan your clinics out in advance. Anything you have to say as a wrap up?
Well, at this point in the season, I hope everybody, is starting to get excited. I know there's some snow on some of the peaks, and the season's approaching fast. So I just encourage everybody to invest in themselves, as well as to think about what you need in order to be good at your job and to be able to give to others, because this is a caring practice that we're all involved with, and that takes a lot of energy.
Pete Allison, always great chatting with you. Appreciate the time. Good seeing you.
Thanks, George.
From the PSIA-AASI Satellite Studios in Boulder, Colorado, I'm George Thomas.